right, everybody. Welcome to Project Herpetoculture podcast. This is episode 58, and I'm your host, Roy Arthur Blodgett, joined as always by the wonderful Philip Leitz from Arids Only. And we have an amazing guest today. I'm really excited for this show. And of course, before we dive in, I'm going to go through our housekeeping. And first, I want to mention Charlie, who edits our audio and makes this a listenable experience for y'all. We could not do this without him, so thanks to Charlie. I also want to acknowledge Dylan and the Animals at Home Network for hosting our show. It's great to be here. And I'll go through our sponsors real quick. So we've got Custom Reptile Habitats, and they're makers of premium PVC reptile enclosures. They have a whole bunch of other stuff that they offer on their website, including Universal Rocks products and some other good stuff. So if you're in the market for any of that, and you're looking to make a purchase, if you do so through the link in our bio or description, we'll receive a small commission at no additional cost to you. And that's always really appreciated when we get those little commissions coming through. So thank you to those who follow through on that. We also have Cold-Blooded Caffeine, and they are roasters of premium quality coffees from all over the world. We have a private label with them that's a light roast from Rwanda, for those of you who like a kind of lighter, more floral coffee. But they also have a whole bunch of medium roast, dark roast blends and single origins for a broad array of palates. And yeah, if you make a purchase from them, use the code Project Herp for 10% off your order. We also have Fairy Tale Dragons. So that's Heather Moy and Ron St. Pierre. And they're absolutely shredding it as always, producing some of the finest herps in the country, including some amazing bearded dragons. And you should definitely give them a follow. See what they're up to. And if you're in the market for dragons, look no further than Fairy Tale. And absolutely. Yeah. And lastly, we have our Patreon. For those of you who are interested in supporting the show directly, you see value in the work that Phil and I are doing here to provide this podcast. We always welcome subscribers there. It's always super appreciated. So you can find us at patreon.com/Project Herpetoculture. And with all of that said, I'm very pleased to introduce our guest today, and that is Stefan Wennekes. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was absolutely perfect pronunciation.
Nice.
But yeah, thank you so much. I'm very honored to be among the people that you allowed on your platform. So.
Oh man, it's a natural fit. Honestly, when we first made the show, you were one of the first people on my list. And I'm not just saying that, it's true. So I've wanted to have you on the show for a long time, and I've been following your content and what you've been doing for a really long time, and really, really look up to it a lot. So it's a perfect fit, and I'm really glad you're here.
Really quick, can I just say, this is totally unrelated, but I remembered this when you were doing the intro spiel. I had a dream last night because, so Dylan from Animals at Home, he can be a little bit, he can pick some, like, let's say modestly sensational titles to the videos. For example, when I went on there, he was like, he made it sound like I like hate naturalistic keeping or something like that. The thing. But I know it's all in good faith. It's all good. But I had a dream last night that like he put out a video after I had been on the show and like recorded a part of the conversation that I didn't know was recorded, where I said a bunch of like messed up stuff, and he like put it out there and was like, "This douchebag." I was like, "Oh my God, Dylan, like, why would you do this, man?" And I mean, obviously I know he'd never, it was just a hilarious, I just thought it was great. It's
just a matter of time. Just a matter of time before Dylan gives us the axe, man.
Yeah, dude, it's totally true. Yeah, for sure. I just wanted to throw that out there. These are the kinds of things I dream about in the world somehow.
It's disappointing for me to be, careful with what I say.
No. Say what you want.
We already record when I was bashing Morse?
I'm going to add that part to the end.
Yeah. Well, at any rate, man. So we really want to start off with something real straightforward. So can you tell us kind of how, like, what your herpetocultural origin story looks like? Like, how did you get started in all of this stuff?
Yeah, it's sometimes hard to be a bit on the chronological side because
Sure.
I've known a
Doesn't
lot
have to
of
be
chaos.
perfect. Yeah.
But my father is a big collector of stuff, and my mother loved animals, and somehow those two genes ended up also in me, and also my brother and my sister. So I remember being into animals and captivated by nature pretty much since I can remember.
Yeah.
I also had the dinos and the Jurassic Park, we had a magazine with dinos, and I had Legos, and the Lego people kept the dinos until the dinos broke free and reigned supreme. And that escalated when I was living at a friend's house, a niece and nephew, that's the English word. And we visited a neighbor. And I remember vividly that I walked into the room and there was this tall terrarium planted with two Phelsma madagascariensis, so the Madagascar giant day geckos, one on each side. And I was like, just captivated. I was like, is this an option? Is this possible? So that was like the catalyst that put in my mind, like, okay, you can keep these animals. It's an option for you. And yeah, I nagged my parents, and my dad had a bookstore, and my mother always liked animals, so they were pretty supportive of that. So I believe I got my first reptiles when I was like 8 or 9. Once I showed that I did a lot of research, that was the Mabuya quinquenniata, I believe, with the blue tail and the lines on the back.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much how it started. And luckily there was a store in town that had a few of those animals, so I would go there almost every day and save my pocket money, whatever I could do.
Sure.
My dad actually built a terrarium with me, my first terrarium, so that helped. And there were some few years of chaos within. I tried to keep reptiles, and sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. It wasn't always at home. So I was always working on it and dreaming on it, but the collection was not very big. And then I was like 16. I went to school. I got a job. Got some money, and I got to work at a small store that also had reptiles and reptile equipment. And from that date, it just went crazy, pretty much.
Yeah.
And it's been so ever since. And over those many years now, I kept mostly snakes. Actually, it started with lizards and then mostly snakes. And within those snakes, I've always had a certain group of snakes. I often had the idea that if I had a group of animals that I wanted to focus on that group, so I had a group of this species for a few years and these, and then switch over it, and then since 2016, mostly focusing on turtles and tortoises.
Cool.
That's pretty much
Very
it.
cool.
Very nice.
I hope it didn't go too fast.
No, that was great. That was awesome. I mean, I love that. Just like that moment that you can recall the moment, seeing that vivarium with the Phelsuma, and it was like, boom, the light bulb went off, or went on in your head. It was like, this is possible. I definitely, I can recall those moments in my life. And it's always cool when someone can remember the exact little moment, and amazing. So go ahead, Phil.
No, sorry. No, I was just going to say, I totally relate to that. I had I think we've all had similar moments like that. But for me, the realization, like I was at a friend's house and he'd been keeping bearded dragons, and he was showing me, he was like, yeah, these are some of what we have. And then like those two, like those, we hatched those from those ones there. And I was like, hold on a minute, hold the fucking phone. You did what? And it was the same kind of moment where I was like, oh man, you have no idea. I am here now. Like I am now here, So I totally relate to that feeling. It's a great feeling. It's cool. Really cool.
Awesome.
Anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, I love that stuff. It's definitely, I mean, what if that person could listen to this podcast and they could just be like, what have I done? You know?
Yeah.
They created a monster. And
What did I start?
now he's got how many Euromastics and kiddie pools, and the guy's he's just completely off the rails. He's got a whole
Way off the
flex
rails,
warehouse. Anyway, so you said your focus currently is on like mostly turtles and tortoises. Can you tell us a little bit about like your current collection and what you're focusing on?
Yeah, for sure. In the basis, I'm focusing on Asian turtle and some tortoise species. And then to narrow it a little bit more closer, I have animals from either Southeast China, so the Guangdong and Shaanxi, if I pronounce that correctly, area, a bit of Hong Kong. And I have a group of animals that are from Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, so the more tropical parts of that part of the world. And I have not that many species because I try to focus species I have. I want to grow those groups. So I work with both species of Cecalia. So there's Cecalia quadriosolata and the Bailey or Bailey, depending on who you ask. I have the Platysternon, the big head turtles. Those are one of those species that when I was, had that moment with the Velsma and I actually saw a picture of that turtle, I was like captivated straight from the point. So I was so happy when I finally got my first one. So the Platysternon, and I have the in the more tropical part, I have Malayamis and Ciborocchiella. I have the three Manaria, the Manarium emis, the Emis varii, and the Impressa. And I have some Kuora, but those are on breeding loan, so I don't really consider those mine. But they are here also when I work with them too. And next to that, I have some lizards, Lanthanotus bornensis, Ceratophora, and Shinisaurus.
Cool.
That's it.
Very cool.
And what is it that drove you? Like, what is it about? I mean, you don't have to go down the list of every single one of them, but what were some of the things that made you land on those particular animals? What was it about them that captivated you so?
That's a good question. I think the tipping point for me to switch from snakes to turtles is before that I did a lot of snakes, and I was quite successful in breeding the species I wanted to breed. So I've done it all. I've done the naturalistic, between brackets, keeping, the bioactive, and also the rare keeping with Moors. And I've bred a lot of blood pythons, the Python bonusmai, and before that, Trimusius, Protopotus, etc. I think the reason for me to go to the turtles and tortoises is because that part of the hobby seemed a bit more serious when it came to stud books, when it came to dietary needs. You needed to dig a whole lot more into dietary needs. UV was also a part of it because now, of course, for snakes, we are also going more that way. But it was a very different way of keeping your animals, a very different approach. And I felt like just breeding snakes for the sake of breeding snakes and because I enjoyed it was not enough anymore. And I felt like with a lot of turtles, specifically the Asian ones, but pretty much all over the world, those species are having a hard time.
Yeah.
In their natural range, they are getting depleted for several reasons. And I felt like, okay, if I'm going to keep an animal and be this pretty selfish person that's going to put in these animals in a glass box, I wanted to have a bit more of a reason. And I felt like if I had those animals and focus on those, if I bred them, will be quite an accomplishment. I will be very proud of myself,
Yeah.
And also I felt like it made it a bit more of a difference than me being one of many that bred a certain group of animals.
Yeah.
There's plenty of people doing snakes very well. And that's what drew me to that group.
Have you always maintained like aquariums too, or did that come before reptiles and amphibians, or did it happen at the same time, or?
For me, the reptile and aquarium pretty much goes hand in hand.
Okay.
So, at least in my life, we had an aquarium before we had reptiles.
Okay.
But we took a lot in the time I started. All of the techniques that you learned with aquarium were implemented in terrarium as far as that was possible. You know, gluing the glass to build a terrarium, etc. And yeah, I always had both. I also bred snakeheads, so the shonas.
Yeah.
The small species, I bred those, and there was always a aquarium next to all the reptiles. And now I have a perfect combo.
Yeah. So in what ways, like, I'm curious about any ways that those two things have influenced one another. You just mentioned, you know, the gluing glass into place to make various, you know, like levels in a terrarium or something like that. But are there other ways, maybe even like, I'm not necessarily thinking in terms of like practical things, like, you know, learning about certain aspects of biochemistry and things like that. I'm thinking more from like a philosophical perspective. Is there are there any things philosophically or conceptually that you have learned or taken from aquaculture and imported into herpetoculture in any way? Or, I mean, I know you said that they were both evolved together in the same way, but I'm just curious if there were things where you're like, I think that's the same thing with damn lizards, you know, or whatever.
What a good question. I've not really thought about that really. So that's something I'm going to focus on in the next while.
Yes.
Like, how does it connect? But what I can answer is that the way I like my aquariums highly influences the way I like my terrariums and the way I approach it.
How so?
And, in the aquarium hobby, biotopes is always what drawn me the most.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I like the planted setups, and I liked, you even have the Dutch style aquarium with certain groups of plants positioned in a certain manner. Mm-hmm. But somehow the biotopes always drew me in most. And what that meant is that but there's more in practice again. But see, now I'm thinking about, what's all the possibilities? So that's a great question, because it triggers something in me that I need to focus on. But yeah, the way I approached my aquariums, what I liked most was the biotopes. Yeah. So it was only natural for me to approach the reptile hobby in the same manner.
Mm-hmm.
Got it.
Yeah, so there was kind of a conceptual basis there.
Yeah.
That translated. Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah, sure.
That's very interesting. I'm very curious about that. I mean, it's like man, maybe this is just my bias or my narrow frame of reference, but I always feel like the folks who I see who maybe do things like saltwater aquariums as well as herpetoculture, I just always feel like they're like a little bit better than the average, you know, like a little, like even sometimes a lot better, but like they always seem to be operating on a level that's like pretty substantial compared to like the average herpetoculturist, you know, and I don't mean it as like a value. Well, it is a value judgment, but I don't mean it it's not meant to be mean spirited or critical of people who don't do the same thing. It's just something that I've missed, you know, there seems to be, it's like, it's almost like an attention to detail, or like a certain sort of like aesthetic sensibility around how you're setting up and designing a habitat that seems to, you know, and like a patience and a meticulousness and a sense of planning that really goes into that kind of development of a terrarium for you know, a herp, that like in some ways for a person like myself just seems so out of place, because like because I just like throw a bunch of crap in a pile and put it in a cage and hang lights over it, and there you go. It seems so much less informed, or so much less like refined, I guess, is compared to what you're doing in some ways.
Well, me with the saltwater only started during COVID, so it was a way for me to escape, but the aquariums were always there. I can see how you feel like what you just described and how you set up a setup is a bit more brute almost, but there is still a lot of thought behind that, and I think that actually herpetoculture helped me to do this correctly. I more see it as whatever thing you do in your hobby and in which hobby you are, is that you can take part from that and you can develop certain qualities, and you can get to know yourself and how you work and what works for you, and you take all those things and then you can apply them to whatever next step you're going to do. And for me, that was, for instance, the salt water. That's something I'm very into now, very focused on. But I'm pretty sure that anybody that does reptiles well can do this too. But I'm also indeed pretty sure that everybody that can do this can take a lot away from this to the reptiles. Because, like you mentioned, Phil, is the planning and the patience was already taught to me by the turtle.
Sure.
Compared to snakes, I'm sure also uromastics, you gotta have a bit more patience than the average lacertile, whatever.
Sure.
So that was already taught to me. But with this, the planning is definitely something that I learned even more and more. You put in the water and then you wait for the nitrous cycle, but it doesn't stop there. You want all this microfauna in there and this zooplankton. So you're going to add these microcrustaceans, and then you're going to look at them, and then you're going to add the snails, and it's not all, I'm done, I can put this in, that, and such in. And you have to measure. So you put something in, and you're just going to look at it mostly, and just observe. Yeah. And then you going to measure, and based on that, you're going to do your next step. And before this, because setting up a terrarium is so natural to me, I just started terrarium. I could do it within the day. I can, I think about what I'm going to do, but if I start, I see the terrarium, I have my materials, I decorate the setup, and I know which lights are going to do whatever, and it's just there.
Yeah.
And but now I'm thinking like, didn't I sometimes move too fast? Because I want that microfauna also in my setups. So now I'm setting up a terrarium. It's been standing for 6 months, and the plants are growing. And once the plants were settled, then I added some isopods and some springtails, whatever. So that's what I'm taking from here.
Yeah, and it's pretty cool too. Like I'm intrigued by the sort of the concepts around specifically, like, well, I guess saltwater. I'm not 100%. I don't know anything about freshwater aquariums, so I'm sure there's like either a similar or an identical concept there. But sort of like a community tank or a predatory tank, right? So I love the idea of having, it's like I could never imagine someone with a monitor, like an Argus monitor, setting up something community driven. However, someone like I think a lot of like Eric Haycraft and how he's keeping the Coleonyx variegatus. No, variegatus is that's the banded gecko, right?
I think it's Metrotus.
Metrotus. Yeah, it's keeping the Central American banded geckos in the base of his enclosures for all his various lizards, which is super cool. Really, really cool. And I love that, it's something that, like, for me, feels like so antithetical to what I want to do. You know what I mean? It's really strange, but at the same time, I can totally imagine something super badass like that in the, in some form in the future, some sort of weird community reptile enclosure, of some variety. It's fascinating. And then, obviously various people do sort of varying degrees of that. But it's something I'm thinking a lot about lately, because, you see a single tank with what, like half a dozen or more various species of fish. Obviously you can go and see multiple dozens of species in a single huge aquarium or something like that, which is even wilder. But like the idea that it's in such a small space, you could somehow convince, a certain subset of animals to coexist peacefully is just remarkable to me, because the Uromastyx in particular hate so goddamn much, just hate each other, hate other animals. But I don't know. That's just something I've been thinking a lot about lately, and about how maybe if I spent a little bit of time doing a sort of a community tank in some way, or, trying it in some other context, maybe I could find a way of like making it more feasible or, more attainable for me. Because it feels so far outside of my comfort zone, Or at least deeply outside of my comfort zone.
Yeah.
Like it's stressed out just thinking about it, honestly.
That's minor uncomfort is good to learn. That's a good. But
for sure.
You don't need total panic. That's not gonna. But I'm pretty. Yeah, I would have full confidence in you being successful, Phil.
I wouldn't.
Oh yeah.
I'll have to borrow some of that confidence you have from you in order to do it myself.
Trust in the Stefan and trust in you. That's sometimes what I say to my students. Like, trust in the Stefan that trust in you.
Oh, very interesting. I like that. You tell that to your students? Like tell me which students, which ones?
I have I'm a almost teacher now at animal management education, and so I am the mentor of now 25 students.
Okay.
And they are also sometimes insecure about the next step, or if they can really do it, whatever. And then I just say, I trust in you, and trusting me, trusting in you. Just do it.
So I'm super curious about that, about animal management and sort of your education around that and teaching that. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how that fits into your life?
Yeah, for sure. Let's see. It's actually funny because I now teach at the school that I dropped out because I found it not compatible with my dreams or my goals or whatever. So it's funny. But I used to be in this type of education. It's just education where you learn how to work with animals, how to care for animals, how to manage animals, how to manage in that environment. And I actually dropped out to take over the management of a pet store on a franchise basis. I did that for 8 years exactly. And at the end of those 8 years, I was invited by the school to teach a class there about venomous snakes, because I was heavily into venomous snakes at the time. So I took some cobras, some Sonophobis, and I taught them about venoms and how to the responsibility that comes with it and how to approach such situation. And that was just great fun. And also a moment for me, I got this interest to me, and at the end of those 8 years, I wasn't happy in the situation I was in. So it was like, okay, maybe this is something. I think this is interesting. And then 6 months later, an old teacher of mine approached me and said, we have an opening for animal caretaker at our school. Is that something for you? I was like, yes. And within 2 days of being there, I was helping with classes, and that was 2019. And I really liked it. It's such a great job. It fits me perfectly, and there was a lot to learn for me. It was new. It was exciting. I felt like I was being useful, So like I added something, And so I did some courses and some education on my own to become a teacher. And in February, I'm going to start a new education to become a biology teacher, because I've done a lot of the didactic and pedagogy, I don't know how to say it in English, area. So how to create a safe learning environment, and how to approach certain classes without me just being talking with a PowerPoint for an hour and just doing info,
Yeah.
I'm absolutely allergic to that, so it was really fun. But now I want to do a biology teacher because I feel like I also want some more in-depth knowledge of that area.
Yeah.
Biology in general, to have some more knowledge which helps me, my students, but also within my hobby. Everything seems to be connected.
Yeah.
And after that, I'm going to look for a specialization, either ecology or whatever. But that's for later.
That is so cool.
And yeah, it's really fun. And so it's education. I work with students that are 16 to 21 years old, sometimes a bit older, and choose this type of education because they enjoy working with animals. Sometimes they don't know the right approach, but the intent is there and the curiosity is there. So you work with a group of young people that are curious, that sometimes ask you questions that make you reflect on your own.
Yeah.
They are great mirrors. It's absolutely fantastic. And it's just fun. I can talk about the things I like and explore together with them. And I really enjoy it.
Do they like what would you say is like the percentage of them that sort of are interested in herpetoculture? Do they all have some interest in it, or do some of them have no interest in that at all, or how does that go?
It's really spread, of course. In the first year, they get like practical classes where you just learn to recognize an animal. How do you approach it? How do you handle or fixate with certain animals? And there's two groups of animals that always bring out the most emotions, and those are either reptiles or the chickens. Somehow,
Interesting.
People are afraid of chickens. Yeah, that's really interesting.
Wow.
But I would say that more and more are interested in herpetofauna, and in the beginning it was mostly the boys, the young men, and there are percentually not a lot of them in this type of education. And now I see all over the board more and more interest from whatever group of people that come to the education already with that interest.
Very cool.
There are also definitely a few that develop it during the education, and they learn to appreciate them. What I often say to them is, everything is interesting if you show interest.
That's hilarious. I love it.
That helps.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. It's true. I mean, it's like if you can cultivate curiosity about anything in terms of learning, it's like you're already ahead. It's like if you can actually be genuinely curious about whatever it is that you're endeavoring in, it really gets you a long way, because it's easy to just like tune out and just like operate under this assumption that whatever you're talking about is actually a boring subject, when actually a lot of things are a lot more interesting if you give them the time of day.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, no, that's deeply true, I think. It's always
sorry, you go.
No, you go, please.
And I totally understand, because I've done exactly the same type of education, that if you're a bit younger and especially you have a goal and you want to go somewhere, then a lot of things around you can almost be like white noise, like stuff that's in the way. You're like, no, I want to know that because I want to go that way, So I can fully understand, especially if you're a bit younger, that that's what happens. But Every class, especially when those emotions get there, and they are a bit scared to handle something, whatever. I don't expect you to handle it straight away. I don't expect you. I'm not going to throw you this snake like catch, go ahead. All I'm asking you is to be open, is to be curious. As long as you do that, I'm already more than satisfied.
Yeah. That's so true. I feel a really similar way about the education that I do, the education work that I do. It's like, I really just want, just engagement, just some level of curiosity. And as long as that's there, it's like great, satisfying.
Yeah.
we can work with that.
Yeah.
I'm curious a little bit about, it's funny, we haven't even talked about it at all, but like, how did the Terrarium channel come about? So the Terrarium channel, can you tell us a little bit about what that is? How it started and what are your goals for it?
Good question, because that almost seems to develop every 3 to 6 months or a year, depending on the experiences I had with it, or the people I've met during this period. I have to be honest, in the beginning, it was a bit of monetary, not because I want to be a YouTuber, and I believe that's a term, but mostly because when I ended with my pet store, I still wanted to try something more with my reptiles, but I did not want to be dependent on the sales of animals.
Yeah.
And so I had a web store with articles for reptile equipment, etc. And I had a lot of information there, because it was also in the period after that first class that I did as a host. And I wanted to connect what was, in written and the materials that were on that website. I wanted to have something more, that translated more to younger people, or how we get our information these days. And I wanted to show how this stuff works, etc. I have to be honest, that soon translated to just showing the stuff that I did. Mm-hmm. And people seem to be open to that. Mm-hmm. And they were interested. So it became more of an informative, blogish style. Okay, this is my current project. This is how I approach it. And it's become more and more my goal to, that's also the line I have on the YouTube, the description is showcasing European herpetoculture. Mm-hmm. So my main goal over the last year or two have been more and more showing people what's been done by people who do interesting stuff, who have interesting collections, who approach their hobby in a certain manner. And that's definitely my goal now. My goal with the channel is to show how incredibly great this hobby is, and the amazing stuff that happens within our hobby. And there's plenty of stuff that's not that great. There's also a lot that's really cool, really interesting. Many great people with all these interesting approaches, and every visit I do brings me something new. So it's also for me, it's just a way for me to contact with people and also get information, and just put that out there for people to maybe pick an idea, or
Yeah.
So it's not a channel like, this is the way of keeping alive, this is how you should care for this animal. It's more of this is something cool, this is how they approach this is the reason why. Here you go.
Very cool.
That's great. I mean, it's pretty cool, the creative outlet that can come from making something like that. And I mean, I don't know, maybe you agree or disagree with this, but it's sort of like, it kind of evolves and takes on its own shape once you kind of start working on it. Mm-hmm. I feel like in some way this podcast has been that, we, like Roy and I were having a conversation before we started this particular episode, and we were talking about how much Well, I mean, maybe we're peripherally talking about this, but it really, it's pretty surreal how much this project of the show itself has taken on a mind of its own in a weird way. Like, and the ways in which, kind of in terms of idea generation, it's like self-generating. Just the act of doing the show propagates more ideas and propagates more, like more sparks of inspiration and curiosity. You know, it's pretty intriguing. So I don't know, is that sort of similar? Would you say that's similar to what your experience has been?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. I remember that, of course, when you start something like this, you want it to be a success. Yeah. So at a certain point, I was also making videos for the sake of making videos. And I was like, and that didn't feel genuine, and you don't want to put effort in that. But once I started to just focus on the stuff that was important to me with the channel, like for instance, you know, you had all of them on the Greenhouse Boys, Ben, Flo, and Till. You know, if you meet people like that and you go to the place and you see what they are doing, that definitely sparks interest. Like, oh, this is interesting. And that's, for instance, in flow setup, it's just not one thing going on. It's a group of animals, it's plants, it is a type of construction. So you get curious about that. So you want to explore that more. But then there's also, I ask a bit of the same question as you guys do, but I always ask a person, like, why did you choose to take this approach? How did you do it, or whatever? Why did you choose this approach? Because there are so many different pathways you can choose within this great hobby. Yeah. So why did you choose this? And then they give you an answer. You're like, oh, that's also something I can explore. And it's just yeah.
I love that.
I hope that answers your question.
No, it definitely answers my question. It's weird how it's like an incredible stark contrast to the ways that other people's perceptions on how to do something or how to approach the exact same problem, it can just be so illuminated and so starkly contrasted to your own just through a conversation, you know, and like being able to spread. I mean, I think it's pretty important. You know, you touched on something about how you sort of like the idea of there's like an element of like education in what you're doing, right? Like it's actually, well, not even an element of, it's like a main driving force behind what you're up to, right? And that, I feel like that is so sorely needed. Like it is so important right now to have as many people doing something like what you're doing as possible in the herpetoculture space. I mean, it's you know, we talked about it a mess of times here on the show and kind of just personally with Roy and myself. It's like, there's not, I mean, it is a wild landscape trying to figure out like how to navigate this space. It's nuts. And you could spend years playing around in weird puddles of nonsense, trying to become a better herpetoculturist and a better keeper and find more like-minded people who could really get caught in weird vortices of bullshit, you know? And so having more people saying like, look, no, I mean, I'm like, we're not only is it like pedagogically sound and intelligently put together and interestingly shot, but it's like, it's philosophically rich and interesting, you know, which is really, I think that's really, really hard to do. I mean, at least, yeah, I think so anyway.
Yeah. Wow. That's a great reaction to that. I think it's stunning to see that these type of reactions are coming from, you know, these type of videos, and it's almost more than I could ask for. But it's indeed a bit of the goal. But like you say, there's so much out there now.
Yeah.
And I believe it is something that I believe Liam and Dylan were also once talking about thumbnails and titles, for instance. And of course, the titles, that's something I struggle with constantly. The titles, you want someone to grab their attention, but I also don't want to be that guy with the clickbait and the whatever.
Yes.
And then there's but do you just use the title to grab someone's attention and to hopefully capture them with a message? Or are you going to say, I'm not going to do that because those are also not the type of people I want to reach? And that's something, I definitely struggle with all the time. And there my train of thought went a different direction. And I can also imagine that for a person coming into this hobby now, because lately some podcasts, the topic was people old school versus new school, bashing, people having no nuance in their feedback when somebody starts. But I can imagine if I would start now compared to how I started in the past. When I started, there was a pet store. I met somebody that was in an aquarium building and that knew a bit of terrariums. And there was a magazine, Lacerta magazine. And that's how I got my information. And luckily, that was an okay place. Now, I can imagine it's so hard for a person that, especially when you're starting, you don't know how to filter all that information and what's important to you. And, I can imagine that you just get lost. So, That's more of a reaction to what you said, that there's these pools of people staying there and reacting to each other, and it's either negative or controversial or, a bit of on the, looking for reaction almost.
Yeah. And I don't, just for the record, like I don't mean, obviously neither of us mean anything against Dylan or Liam for taking that perspective. I mean, I get it. Like, on a certain level, if you're playing in the world of the algorithm, you have to play into the algorithm to some degree. Like I totally get it. Right. But I'm with you. I don't want to be that person. I have no interest in posting anything sensationalized at all. Like, it's just not, because it's who I am. Like it doesn't align with my worldview or my, like the values that I really hold on to. It just doesn't align for me. Right. And I will happily sacrifice like losing to the algorithm in some regard for the sake of maintaining that particular principle or value for me. And it's not exactly negotiable in some ways for me. But I think in some ways, number one, I think it's likely that algorithms are bound to change at some point, especially with things like with various kinds of AI getting into the picture, right? But also, I do think that the old saying, birds of a feather flock together, like or the other one that's the good one is simple minds rarely differ. Like I do think a lot of us will find other people like us, you know what I mean? And I don't mean to be excluding anybody and that's not my intent here. It's just to say that I think that people who have similar interests or similar ideals as like the three of us having this conversation will have a tendency to find us. They will try to kind of seek out this same kind of stuff. And as long as it's out there, people are there's going to be a market for it. Like I think about it all the time. There's there's a market for, there's a rapper that I really like. Immortal Technique says this, and he's like, he goes on this whole rant about how he's like, what are you talking about? There's not going to be a market for it. There's a market for chocolate covered roaches, and I'm like, yeah, actually, it's a really good point. Like there's a market for chocolate covered roaches, and so it's just kind of intriguing to me. I feel like, especially in the YouTube space and in the social media space, you're now talking about a market of 8 billion people, a huge number of people. It's no longer just like, you're not trying to get a sliver of the population of the United States. You're trying to get a sliver of the population of the globe, which is for all you flat earthers out there. No, just just playing. But like, yeah, I don't know. Does that make sense? What I'm saying? Or
Yeah, for sure. On this disc. No, but I definitely understand you. And what I also meant with Dylan and Liam is that I remember, I don't know when, but they had this conversation and they were contemplating on this concept of where do you put your title and the value of it, and does it translate? Is it then okay? So they were also definitely conflicted at that time, at least. For me, I tried it. I tried to do the like a reptile room tour does great, feeding your reptiles, whatever, does great. But I'm like, this doesn't add anything. This is not what I would want to see. I really don't care about feeding animals because I can see it here. Right. Sometimes for a certain species I'm interested or whatever. I don't care about your reptile room that doesn't change every month. That's just not for me. And I also feel like it's almost more inclusive in some regards, and of course I would like to talk to like-minded people because you can elevate each other. I think it's also good to have people from the outside like poking in to to rattle something so you don't get stuck. But a lot of the conversations lately are not about intent, not about why, not about what is our general mutual interest or goal, whatever. It's more about he did it this way, but I want it to be done that way, and you should do it like this. I think that's not a productive conversation to have. It costs energy, negative energy, and I've known plenty of that, so I'm not gonna put my time and effort in that. For me, it's definitely like, oh, look at all the cool stuff that's happening, and you don't have to do it like this. But maybe you see something that's interesting to you, and if that's what you take from it, it's been valuable enough to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, I think that there's just something to be said for investing more in seeking to inspire rather than seeking to discourage, and like, it's just a much more positive and like progressive approach. And I feel like it's so well illustrated with the Terrarium channel and just what you're doing. It's there's been a lot of times that I've watched stuff that you've posted that I've just been like totally blown away by. Like most recently, this keeper, all these outdoor setups that you just recently posted. I mean, that was just like, it was also so exciting for me because that's something that that is a long-term goal of mine to try where I live. And to see somebody doing it on that level, who's like, I mean, clearly that is like many years in the making, and there's so much thoughtfulness and so much refinement that has gone into that. It's just really, it's exciting, and it's like, it's inspiring, and it feels like emboldening for me on some level to be like, oh yeah, no, this can be done. It's not like, because frankly, I mean, finding examples like that, particularly within American herpetoculture, is pretty hard to do. There are not a lot of examples of that particular style of outdoor keeping that you showed in that most recent video that I'm referring to. But anyway, yeah, I just think that kind of stuff is really, really valuable.
Yeah, that was one of the examples. That was the video that pretty much showed what my goals were. And the funniest thing is that by the way, the garden was only 3 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, that was crazy. Absolutely. Of course, there's a lot of experience going behind it, and when we started that, but that garden itself was 3 years old. But the funny thing was, the person I did the video who keeps all the vipers outside, he was like, Stefan, before you're going to meet up with me, I want you to meet me here. Take plenty of batteries. That's all I knew.
What?
And you can imagine when I came there, that I walked in that garden, I was like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
And I really want to go back there because I was just you might have noticed also now, sometimes I need to think about my questions or how I think about that myself, because I get, something happens and then it follows up in my brain. So that also happened in that garden. I almost did not ask questions because I was just looking and I was listening to my friend and him talking, but I was almost asking no questions. So I was like, oh, did I miss something for the channel? And how about this? And how about that? But yeah, that was great. And that was the perfect example of what I wanted to do. That's also the only video you're gonna find on it. It's not on social media. It's so cool.
It's so amazing. I mean, just everything about it. I mean, for those who haven't seen it, I'll post a link to it in our description and everything, because everybody listening to this, like, take the time to go watch this video. It's one of those things where it just kind of reframes what is possible, and it's so funny because, like, I think 4 or 5 different friends of mine sent that to me and were like, this made me think of you. And it's like, I was just like, yeah, this is the dream right here. This is it. That's so cool. So inspiring. So, and I love that backstory too. I love just like this image of you, this mental image of you showing up and not knowing what to expect and just being and seeing that, and just, I would have the same response of being quieted by it and just wanting to pay attention and listen and observe and almost like not even disturb the atmosphere with questions. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, that was awesome. And I had a bit of a hiatus on the channel before that, because also with my work, which is really, really busy, but also because I was done, thinking what I wanted, that people wanted to see. I just wanted to do what I thought was interesting. And there's a channel that's not a reptile channel that really inspires me. That's Natro, and also Sea Friendly Reef. It's done by the same person, Tobias, and his quality of videos and the pacing, etc., was so nice. It was like, okay, move forward. This is the direction I want to go. He does mostly aquariums, but also some reptile, some terroristic, and so I didn't post for 100 days. And then I made that video. I took my time and I posted it. I was like, okay, this is interesting to me. This is what I would like to see. And that video, with 2 videos, I've done more than with all the 10, 12 videos before that, except for the Greenhouse Boys and except for whatever. So that's also, like Phil said, people are going to find you. That was also the video that was like, okay, this is what I need to keep doing, and so I also deleted a whole lot of videos that did not fit within that, within that goal and whatever. So I got some people sending me messages like, hey, where's this video? And hey, where's that video? But I was like, okay, this is the approach I want to take, and these are the videos I like, and the videos I did not like because I could hear myself being rushed or not fully into it, I deleted all of them. There was a care video I did, and I was like, oh, now I would not approach it now that way. And I was like, okay, I can leave it on for the views, or I can just delete it and make one I'm confident about. So I just deleted it.
Yeah, and I mean, there's definitely something there about like refinement of craft. You know what I mean? Like, oh my God, like I can't imagine when we're 10 years deep into this show, what we're going to think of the first 2, 3 we did. We're gonna be like, what the fuck were we thinking? You know what I mean? But like, oh, hi Zeus. But even on my own, like on my YouTube channel for Arids only, it's like, I've got a few videos on there that I leave up because it's like, I don't really have the time at the moment to like make new videos to replace them. But there's a huge distinction between the ones that were like well thought out, well planned, well shot, et cetera, and the ones that were more like, I'm just going to put something up because I feel like I have to, it's like, it's such a huge difference. And, I'm not necessarily interested in like the perfection part of, like when I started doing this on a larger scale, and I made a like a blog or a website just to kind of track what I was doing with my herpetoculture and whatnot. I remember, I mean, again, this was probably this was like 10 or 12 years ago, so this is a little while ago, but I remember kind of having this feeling like nobody ever shares the bad stuff. It's always the good stuff, and I think that's changed now. I can think of a number of friends who are much better about sharing the negative things and just being more transparent about what they do, and like about the realities of keeping and working with animals. Some stuff just, it never goes perfectly. That's just not how it goes. Stuff just happens. But with that said, I remember at the time having kind of ethic in my head that was like, I'm going to share everything. Like, I want to share all of it. I want the blemishes to be shown as well, and and I definitely think there's something to that. I don't think it has a place in every person's body of work, but like, I love that. I love the progress that you get to see out of Jesus. Like, even an Instagram page, dude, like the first 100 or so posts on my Instagram page, it's nonsense. And it's like droplets of water on leaves and stupid shit that I was posting when I was in college and nothing. It didn't have anything to do with reptiles. It evolved into a business, and it's kind of cool to have that. And I think it's probably going to be a similar thing when we're 10 years deep into the podcast. And I hope that you'll have that same capacity when you're 10 years deep into the, or 20 years deep into the terrarium channel, where we'll be able to look back on some of the first stuff you ever posted and be like, boy, this really didn't even come close to what you're doing now. I mean, that's kind of, because that's a cool thing. It's kind of awesome to have that, right?
Yeah, that's definitely true. And I left some things of those in the past, but I think I felt more uncomfortable with those because I knew the uncomfort they gave me, or I can recognize that in what type of situation you was when you made them. And I'm also the type of person, I've always been, that I don't know if it's just my personality of how my life has been. I start over from nothing for a lot of times. But if I play a game and I did that game and I reached the end, I was like, okay, this is how I did it. What can I do better? Oh, this and this and this. Okay, and I just delete the whole game and start from scratch. So that's a personality trait I guess I have in that sense. So that's also my Instagram is the pictures are only from this year.
Yeah.
The rest.
Yeah. Which is cool. I mean, I'm totally here for curation too. Like, I'm not opposed to that or anything. It's just like, man, it's fun to think about. It's fun to watch. It's fun to see progressions and changes and development and refinement. I mean, there's something so addicting to the refinement of a craft and the development of a body of work. I mean, I don't know. It's just so captivating. I'm not sure where that really comes from and why that's so interesting.
No, that's a good one. Maybe, but that's you. I believe you also have an art background, right?
I do.
So, and then there's a lot of artists that look back on their old work and then see what they have come now. That may also makes you think on the place you want to go. I'll start here now what I can do to. Yeah. So maybe that's a part of it. Yeah.
It also could be like an addiction to producing. You know what I mean? Like I think there's a fine line between intrinsic, but like walking that balance between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, and like having, like, for example, like, and this is, sometimes I feel like I probably shouldn't relate so much of conversation to myself, but regardless, that's just what happens here. I was intrinsically motivated to like reduce the number of Eurastic species that I'm keeping overall, and narrow my focus a little bit on, at least in terms of Euros. I have a whole mess of other crap that I'm playing around with now, but like the Euromastics in particular, I was really motivated to do that myself. It didn't come from the outside. Whereas I think when I first started working with Euros, there was an extrinsic, like an external motivation that drove me to keep lots of different ones in the first place. It was like, I wanted to, it was ego driven. It was like, I wanted to prove that I could keep all of them and I could breed all of them and I could figure them out, and that it was well within my wheelhouse. And like it felt like credibility building in some regard, you know? And now I kind of look back on that and I feel a little bit weird about it to a certain degree, because of like, you know, it was not well thought out and it set various examples that I don't necessarily agree with now. And, you know, but it's, I mean, at the same time, it's okay. It's like, it's kind of how things, you know, like led to what's happening now in my life. But like, it's hard to have that balance, to strike to understand in the moment exactly what decisions you're making are coming from inside of you for the right reasons, and that are coming from outside of you for, you know, good or bad reasons. That's a very hard line to walk, because the answer is not always clear, you know? So like with that in mind, I'm really curious to ask you, if you could do you have who or what are some of the influences that you have in life in herpetoculture? Like, what are, you know, these can be examples, these can be role models, these can be people that you watch what they're up to and like their work, you know, everything. I'm curious. These could even be just like, you know, oh, I listened to the, you know, I read this book on plant biology 10 years ago that motivated me deeply. I mean, all of it, literally everything is cool. I'm curious.
Yeah, of course, animals, they change it all. No, once you started listening.
Oh, woot woot! Let's go, Dylan.
My character became so much better. No, I think for me the greatest interests, or the influences I had, were the ones that. I'll say this. I was already very enthusiastic. So, like a lot of people, and people are going to hate me for this, a lot of people found Steve Irwin like the man.
Sure.
And it was a great inspiration to them. He wasn't to me, because I didn't need to be made enthusiastic. I just wanted to see the damn animal. So when I was younger, I, like Mark O'Shea, that type of person was something I looked up to more, and was more influenced by definitely his approach, the way he handled the animals, etc. And I was very lucky that there were some key moments, just like the Velsima setup. There was the foster father, I believe, I don't know if it's the correct name, but of my sister. He also kept some reptiles, and he gave me some books about them, so I read those. And a little bit later in the hobby, when I was starting to work with Vipera, I had a guy I met, Ingo. He doesn't know, but he has taught me a lot in the way he approached the hobby, and also a bit serious. And that's something that really struck me. Also, for instance, us Dutch people, we hate to pay. And it's very normal to haggle about animal prices.
Yeah.
And that's just the culture I grew up in, so that's what we did, And then I met him, and there was a certain animal that was pretty rare, and they're gone now. And I was going to buy some animals from him, and he offered more. So then there's this typical, like, okay, if I buy all 5, can I get them for, such and such? And he just didn't respond. He was like, F you.
Okay.
And those type of influences were there. And it didn't all start at a reptile show. So you had to go to people and see their collections. And that really helped me. And so I think those were the big influences to me. And just nature. Nature is also a big influence. So all the nature documentaries, that's what I found most interesting. And that's why that's more the direction the people I've met showed me how to get there.
I love that.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting too. It's weird how like some of the various examples that you can find in the work you do can be, some of them can be like in their energy and in their vibe, you know, like for me, like I'm one of those people for whom Steve Irwin was like a big inspiration, right? Like I just always enjoy like his level of psych, like the fact that he was flexing half the time. Like I was just like, yes, let's go. This is great. You know, but I also loved Mark O'Shea. I liked Jeff Corwin's show. You know, all of it was good to me. I had, you know, but also, you know, there are various people where, you go and sometimes they inspire you in a philosophical way. You know, like my friend Camille Hammers, Hammerhead Reptiles, you know, long-term buddy of mine, like Cam inspires me in ways that like continue to evolve. You know, for a while, I was inspired by his success with the animals he was working with. Then there were times when I was inspired by his resilience through certain mistakes that would happen or when things didn't go his way. Then I would be inspired by his ability to take on new challenges and work with various animals. Then I would be inspired by the fact that he was able to stick with projects that for a long time, you know, like through failures, just continue to keep going. Then I would be inspired by his, like the fact that he just continues to refine and get better at what he's doing all the time. So it's like, it's cool how people can have different ways of inspiring you and different ways of like making an impact on what you do and different ways of like, you know, it's like giving you ideas. It's, you know, it's super cool. It's something that like, if you don't participate for a long time, you might not ever get to those points where you get that luxury, right? Like if enough time hasn't passed, you don't really get the opportunity for that, right? And so there's sort of it's like time invested in something just pays dividends over and over and over again because the ways it can give you benefit evolves over time, right?
Yeah, for sure. And as you
Sorry, my cat is fucking weird. Chewing on my backpack. What are you doing, buddy?
Bengal.
Yeah, there you go. The house panthers.
And what you say now, I gave the example with Ingo with the price, and that was more of him saying like, you know, this is an animal, this is a live being. If you are interested in this animal, what doesn't matter. And he was also so meticulous about the way he approaches this hobby, and I was a little bit like that. So when I saw somebody do it like that, it's like, oh, you know,
yeah.
So yeah, great example. And definitely there are so many great moments, and it happens every time. Also when I make the videos, every person I meet, there's always something you take away. And it's beautiful, really. And that's also what makes you wanna stay in there, because you can approach the hobby relatively simple,
right?
Yeah, you know, you can't just do something and just keep doing it, and it's probably gonna work for a very long time. But for me, it needs to be more than that, because otherwise it's just me putting something in a box. And
sure,
it can't stop there for me.
Right.
Yeah, I feel similarly.
For you guys, it's exactly the same.
Yeah, I definitely relate to that. It's for me, the trend is always toward like increasing complexity, and sometimes it can actually be it can make things more challenging for me in certain ways. Like for example, when I moved recently, it was like, oh my God, like it was such a thing because I had so many systems, because they had all layered over time, you know? And so it was like, you know, I started out with, you know, the setups I had, and then it was like, okay, now I'm adding misting systems. I'm going to add ventilation fans. I'm going to add, so I had all of these layers that I had added on over a couple of years of time. And I realized when I had to take them all apart and then move them, it was a very different task than it would have been if I had just moved what I had started with, and but at the same time, like there's no regret in that, because I think that with each continued layer of complexity, I've seen like some new behavior or some new benefit emerge, for my animals, and also for myself. My learning has grown from that continual process of refinement and increasing the complexity. It seems like that's definitely something that I've noted in your way of approaching things too, is that like you need to have that complexity to stay interested, to stay learning, to stay stimulated. And one thing I've learned over time is that like that's just not the way that everybody orients at herpetoculture, and that's not a bad thing at all. I don't mean to place a hierarchy on that in any way. But it's just helpful for me to remember that that's not what makes everybody tick. Some people just want their system, and the satisfaction they draw from it is a longer arc, and it's less about this kind of process of like tinkering and refinement.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And like you said, and it will be way easier for you to just stay content, in whatever you started with. So as you mentioned, I added difficulty, sometimes maybe even some uncomfort. It's probably easier to not do that, so I can understand to stay there. And as you mentioned, a lot of people don't have that, and that's totally okay. It's really important to know the context and the personal drive that a person has before you even start to discuss whatever approach you want to take, or if you should do something a certain way, yes or no, whatever. It can be so different. Everybody's context is different, but for me, it's definitely important. I think that's also just based because I don't know if you guys have the same, but I often almost feel sort of guilty towards my animals. I remember I had a Parane Salvadori, the monitor.
Yeah.
And I remember acquiring that animal. I had a big setup. This was way bigger than, it was okay, at least. But I remember that I had it, and when you start to think about it, and when you finally have it, it's so exciting. This is such an incredible animal. And then you have this setup, and you have a few branches, and then it sits on that branch, and these crop monitors, they move their eyes like a parrot almost, whatever. And I was just staring at that animal, and I felt so uncomfortable with myself. I was like, also because in that time, a lot of what was wild caught, I just remember staring at that animal and feeling so uncomfortable with, man, am I a bad person? If what I'm doing is doing, pride to the animal. And I think that was a big moment for me also. Just seeing that animal in that environment, which wasn't bad, but it certainly, it felt not right.
Right.
Yeah, Phil and I were just talking about this earlier today, actually. Yeah, this kind of dynamic of, like, I think that there are some people that within the herpetoculture community that would like hear what you just said and feel like confronted by it and almost like, don't say that, because it's like, there's so much protectiveness, because I think particularly, I think it's pretty global, but there are forces out there actively trying to eliminate the privilege of keeping reptiles, and I think that because as reptile keepers, we know that we're sensitive to that, and we're often very defensive and protective of what we're doing. Obviously, we see value in it, and so to entertain questions like that almost feels like it may be lending ammunition to the opposition or something like that, But I personally, I don't view it that way. I think that that is something that we should all be considering, at some point. I think that it's valuable. even if only as a thought exercise, to consider like the baseline assumptions that we have about herpetoculture and whether or not it's okay at all to keep an animal in a box. I think it's a good thing. It's a good thing to have questions about, and that the product of that kind of line of thinking, I think, is only one that ultimately benefits the animals, and benefits the keepers, byproduct of that. So,
yeah, and that doesn't mean that I certainly believe that reptile keeping is here to stay and should be here to stay, and as value for sure. And and I also think it's important, then, because I feel that way, other people don't have to feel that way, and you just have to know a baseline from this point. I think it's acceptable, but that's certainly something that drives me also with the approach to new animals. Me keeping the animal for the sake of keeping the animal is not enough anymore. It needs to be and that develops, and over the last 10 years the animal keeping in general has changed so much. And that's okay. And as you mentioned, Roy, a lot of people don't want to hear that, or maybe confronted with that. That's how I approach reactions to criticism almost. I once got asked the question, but what if you get like negative responses on your videos or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
If I get a negative response, if something like me saying this draws a negative response from somebody, what I do then is, if somebody says something to me and that brings out this reaction in me, that's either because maybe internally I'm actually agreeing and almost insecure about the way I'm keeping, or I've made conscious decisions knowing that this is not benefiting the animal but myself mostly.
Right. Yeah.
And then if somebody says something like, "Oh, they touched the nerve," or something like that, and if they make a comment that's this, but I've contemplated this idea and I've chosen what I'm doing or the approach I took in a certain manner, and I've thought about that, and this is the decision I've made. It doesn't affect me, So What I try to say with that is, if people get uncomfortable, maybe it's because they are doubting on what they are doing, or they are knowing that maybe they made some more bit selfish decisions, and that's not always a bad thing. But it's good to reflect on that. Like, why at the start, why did I make this choice?
Right.
And if you can live with the choices you've made, perfect. But if it makes you uncomfortable, if it makes you think, then maybe that's a good reason to see how you can, stand behind your decision or make a change. It's cost a lot of energy to stay uncomfortable. So you either gotta accept it or change it. One way or the other.
Very, very well said. Yeah, I like that. It takes a lot of energy. That's a good way to say it. Yeah.
Sure.
It's true. Yeah. Well, so we are creeping up on getting closer to 2 hours here.
Yeah.
And what I was hoping is we could we kind of might steer towards a close of the conversation, not because I want it to end, but because we both I know it's late over where you are, and I know Roy and I both have a handful of things we're up to later on this afternoon. But what I was hoping is I've got there's two more questions I'd like to ask you before our closer question. But I'd like to kind of combine the two, if that's cool with you. So the two questions are basically like, what excites you most about herpetoculture, and what do you see? What does the future look like for you? Like, do you have a sense about what the next 3 to 5 years looks like for you in particular, or for the hobby broadly?
what excites me. And um, what excites me about the hobby is this, what we are doing now, what's happening now with your podcast and some other platforms. That's what excites me about the hobby, is that the conversation is being had. I don't know if that's correct English language.
Yeah, it is.
That the conversation is there, and that there are people around that are trying new things and that are open to new things, and that work with all these different species of animals, that they deliberately choose animals because they want to increase their number in our hobby for whatever reason, and they are trying new stuff, and people are looking to connect. That's what excites me the most, just what's going on now. I think it's a great conversation to have, to whatever point that leads,
Yeah.
And that's definitely what excites me. And what excites me is people coming together, and you see the in Europe we had a lot of I don't know how you say this. You have USARC, etc. How do you call a group like that?
The lobby.
Lobby.
But also just a group of people coming together to talk about their hobby. I don't know.
Society.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
That's it. So there used to be a very big society in the past, and then came forums and Facebook, and that all went a little bit down. And now you see people are coming together a bit more collectively. Also in Europe again, there's a few that stayed, but a lot of just disappeared because they weren't able to captivate the younger persons, or the hobby just took a different approach at that time. So it's cool to see that coming back. It's also a result of the fact that, as Roy also mentioned, that a lot of people don't think animals in captivity in general is a good thing. So, there are definitely people trying to take that away. And so it's also a reaction to that. But I think it's a good thing that is happening. I really enjoyed seeing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's only a beneficial thing that there are more outlets for face-to-face interaction, within herpetoculture, I feel like it's heartening to see a little bit of a move away from just it being like this very online communities, and like a little bit of like, it seems like there's just something of a revival starting to happen with herp societies and kind of more local herp outlets. So hopefully that continues to grow. I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, I think so too. But this is the place where you can find nuance also often.
Exactly.
On the internet, it's often lacking. And that's why I also stay away from that. But if I look at how people react to our hobby, I wonder where they are experiencing that hobby, because they seem to like all nuance. But yeah, it's cool to see all that stuff. And like I said, your project, guys, it's one of the few podcasts I listen to, because it's not just about the how, but definitely also the why. And
Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. It feels really great. And it plays right into the last question I have for you, which is which I think which is why herpetoculture. So what the hell? Why the hell?
Why the hell? Can I ask this from two different viewpoints? Is that okay?
Please.
Of course, yeah. You can answer this whenever you want.
Because the first approach I would take is just reptile keeping in general, and animal keeping maybe in the context of just keeping animals. And I think, and without denying that there are a lot of facets, with the temperature, with the techniques, with the knowledge you need to have to take care of a certain animal. I think in general, a lot of reptiles are quite suited to be kept in captivity, just by their how they live in nature. And of course, there's nuance. I mean, I would never keep a king cobra because a while ago I was at a talk and they had a king cobra they tracked and it moves for 100 kilometers. Well, there's also a lot of animals that stay around one rock. I know a lot of people that go out herping and they can say that rock, that animal.
Totally.
Yeah.
You know, and if you desire to keep an animal in a relatively confined space, I think a lot of reptiles are perfectly suited for that if you take the right approach. But that's with a lot of animals. You know, a lot of animals seem easy, but most of them are slowly dying. Or I think most animals deserve more of our attention than we give them when we try to take care of them. So from a more practical and animal caretaking, I think a lot of reptiles are very suited to be kept in captivity just by the way that they live and things like that, with the knowledge we have now. That being said, of course.
Yeah.
For me, I knew this question was coming. For me, do you know how you say my body? There's this self, and then there's my body.
Yeah.
So I am on a more almost a spiritual plane. There's the I, and I don't say I body, I say my body. This is part of me. And for me, I hate the word hobby, but I don't have a difference. But for me, my hobby, I say that with the same weight as I say this is my body. It's just a big part of me. As I said, I've known some chaos, and having the reptiles there and something I luckily found when I was really, really young to focus on and to dream about. That's what has kept me from making some of the choices that a lot of people around me made, because I had this responsibility towards them. It's taught me so well. It's taught me about responsibility. It has helped me connect with now some of my best friends. It was something to pay attention to when everything else was falling apart. Yeah. You know, it just kept me here. It just learned me so much, and I almost feel indebted to the animals I keep now and the way I approach my hobby. Yeah, and I see that for a lot of people too. And animal care in general can teach you so much, and I think it's important for every person to have. Passion is fleeting, you know, but because it's a strong emotion, but you know, something that they are just totally infatuated by, and whatever that is good to have. And also get uncomfortable if people don't have like a hobby or something they are excited about. I don't know. Yeah, but that's another direction. Yeah. So that's the why for me. It's kept me here. It's so fascinating. It has taught me so much, and I owe a lot to this.
Yeah, man. Well said. Well put. Love that. I love that. I really enjoy that quite a bit. Well, so tell folks where they can find more of you on the internet.
Yeah, of course, you gotta like, subscribe, hit the notification. You can find me on the Terrarium channel. That's on YouTube, and I try to post videos when I can. And there's also the Instagram page that I use to, you know, sort of share day by day stuff. Also, Terrarium channel. I have vacation now, so now there's influx of posts. I will be busy soon, so it's a little bit less, but those are the places you can find me. And if you have any questions or disagreements or whatever, feel free to contact.
Nice.
Sounds great. I will of course have links for the listeners in there and including a link to that amazing video that we talked about earlier. So would really encourage everybody to follow along with what Stefan's doing and watch that video and just keep up with it. It's amazing. So thank you so much for joining us today. And I'm going to go ahead and hit the button and stop the recording.